this. It's just like it is every time I go and click that last button.
Perfect.
Oh, wait.
Seamless.
Hang on. 3, 2.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for taking some time out of your Monday evening to join John and myself. We've got an interesting show for you tonight, but I will be honest, this show is only going to be as good as the chat room is going to be, because I've got my list. I think John has his list. And, you know, if you don't chime in with your list, then it's going to be like 5 seconds. But tonight, we're going to look back on your DJ career. We're going to go back. Maybe it's last month. Maybe it's last year. Maybe it's way back from the very beginning. But we want to get an idea of what is some of the gear that you wish you hadn't bought.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of get a feel for what it is. Now, I will say this. There's got to be a why to it. Because unless you decided to buy the Huey Lewis and the News albums that were not the greatest hits,
Still,
we need an explanation.
Buying the albums was such a smart investment.
Not buying them, I agree.
The way the value will accrue on those albums, someday you'll be able to say to your kids, I could have bought you gold bullion, but instead I bought you Huey Lewis. True story.
Was that on 8-track?
Doesn't matter.
Cassette?
Everything appreciates if it's got. So,
good deal.
So we've got a variety of different sections, topics, or areas, I should say. I've got flubs in the speaker world. I have flubs in the lighting world. I have flubs in just general audio. And then I get into camera flubs. I'm not even going to talk about tool flubs that I've had for over the years. You know, that one tool that I had to have. Mm-hmm. Oh, we'll talk about some of those too. There's going to be a couple of those that'll be kind of fun.
Oh, we got to throw that in, absolutely.
There's going to be a couple of those because there's a couple of tools that yeah. So we can get that. So where do we want to start, Dan?
We'll just kind of go back and forth. Some of mine aren't necessarily going to be flubs. These are just going to be kind of, you know what? If I'd really thought about that ahead of time, I don't know if I should have bought that. Okay. But my first one, this one is for me is a huge flub. All right. This was the one, and I don't know if I mentioned this, you might not even know it. All right. It was called Virtual Vinyl. It was a product. I think it was Newmark. It was Newmark Q. It was basically their version of Serato. All right. So when back when you had the SL1 box, okay, it was very similar to that same type of box. And when I was getting into, finally, I'm like, I'm going to be a digital DJ. All right. I'd been using CDs for years. I'm going to get over into that. And so I was like, well, the SL ones, they were, I forget what the price was, but this was like maybe $100 cheap or something like that. So I got it, hooked it up, never could get the thing working. Called the company that I bought it from. They walked me through it. We couldn't get it working. But because of it being software, they wouldn't take it back.
Yeah.
So finally we were able to get it finagled. And I was like, listen, I'm not saying I want to send it back. If you can get it working, I'll keep using it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I need to do something. So fortunately, we ended up working on credit. I bought an SL1 and I never looked back. But it was Virtual Vinyl. I still remember the name of the box. And I'm pretty sure it was Newmark Q was the name of the software.
Interesting. I don't remember hearing about that one whatsoever. Again, in the chat room, we got some people bouncing in there. Cheap speakers. Joe mentions cheap speakers. That became virtual DJ? No,
definitely not. Virtual DJ was around before this. This was very much a knockoff of Serato. I will say this. I think it was under the same company, because I think actually when I go into my virtual account, the Newmark Q is listed in there. So I think the same company, but it definitely was not Virtual DJ. Very different.
Excellent. So I'm going to jump to a speaker one, and we'll come back and catch Dave's here. So back when we were expanding, I wanted to get some bigger subs. I want to get a 4-speaker system, and I needed some big subs. And the Cerwin-Vega earthquakes were just more money than I wanted to spend. Well, I found this company, and Brian's talked about this company out of Wisconsin called Sonic Speakers. And that particular set of, I found them, somebody was selling them, and it's like, these were going to be awesome. I bought these Sonic speakers, and they were designed so you just run from, you only needed one amplifier, you'd run into the sub and then piggyback to the top, and they were supposed to be this oh so great sounding thing. Well, there were 2 different versions of this set of speakers. There was ones that had decent cones inside, and one of them that had the cheap ones. Well, I got the ones that were the cheap ones. I got them home. I listened to them. I EQ'd them. I put a 30-band EQ on it, and it could not make these things sound good whatsoever. They never went out. They never were used for anything. And I think I ended up giving them away or something stupid like that. So a pair of, it was I think like 18-inch sub and like a 12-inch top or something, whatever the top was, I don't even know anymore. But a set of Sonic speakers were absolutely horrid. And some people have had really good experiences with the Sonic. They had the better quality components in there. But I think I paid a total of like $500 for all 4 speakers. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a great deal. I'm going to be, a sound system. And it only has to do, a few dances. Well, even with my biggest amplifier pushing it, which was way wattage above, which is okay because you can do that. If your amplifier's got more headroom, that's okay. It just couldn't produce volume at all. And the cones weren't blown. It was just wasn't designed for what we do. So, yeah. RCF loaded versus, the RCF, where they put the RCF in there, I think those were the ones that were the good ones And Dave mentions in the chat room buying an 18-inch powered speaker, JBL sub, and he thought he needed it, and turns out he didn't. I think we've all got that story, at somewhere. Rob,
while we're talking about flubs, let's talk flubs. We'll talk flubs, and then we'll talk about the other side that we talked about. So I've got another flub here, and that was a mini disc player.
Oh yeah, there we go. We can talk.
Right. Now I made the huge mistake with mini disc players. So I got them when they first came out. This was like, when the time that they came out, this was really before like burning CDs was really like commonplace. So it's like, if you wanted to kind of combine a few tracks, you had to figure out a way to do it. And mini disc was like the first cost-effective way, we'll say, to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I bought a mini disc, like home stereo type system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found a way to put it into my rack. I had like a 19-inch rack like we all had at that time, and transported it. Well, the home units are not really designed for the bumping and banging that a unit will take in transport. And I think I went through 3 or 4 like repairs of them. Like I had it stopped working on me. I sent it into a repair shop, and it came back, worked it for a little bit, still was doing it. Finally, I said, forget it. And then I went to like the portable. It was almost like the old Walkman style.
Right.
In fact, I think it was Sony anyway that made it. And so I was doing that, and I had that unit, and I had that one for probably like 3 months, and then it was like no longer needed.
Yep.
Like the timing was just like, I spent this money on just this, and yeah. And of course, you can't even like give it away at a yard sale.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. And although some of the technology still to record to mini disc still functions, and it still sounds pretty good. I mean, it's obviously has a little more compression, but you can't give it away.
It was interesting. I actually ran into, and he's a great guy. Please do not take this as a knock. My sister-in-law got married. It's probably been 5-6 years ago now. 6 years, I think she's about how long she's been married. And the DJ for her wedding had mini disc players. Now he didn't use it for like normal stuff. He used it for the intros.
Okay.
So like he could go track to track to track to track really quick.
Right. Yeah.
If they were all doing it. So it was kind of cool to see it. And I got to talk with him a few different times about it. And I was like, you doing mini disc? Like now? Like that was been gone for a while. And he's like, I only use it for this part, and it works beautifully for this part. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, John, what's another flub?
Let's see. We're going to stick with audio for speakers because this is another one that hurts my soul to have to refresh this one. I bought a pair. We were having more females come on staff at the time, and they were not big, strong, young ladies. So we needed to have lighter speakers for the top. And I thought these PAS speakers that I found, they were really cheap. They were like $100.
You said POS?
PAS.
Oh,
They were a POS, but it was PAS is the name brand on these. So we get these up here, and they were 12-inch two-way cab. They looked really nice, and it's like, yeah, handles and their shape, and they looked durable. You plug them in, and they sounded like a very poor quality AM radio. Didn't matter what you put through them for sound and EQing, they were like a poor quality AM radio. Again, the tweeter worked fine. The sub bar, the woofer worked fine. It's just they were just so poorly tuned. And I called up the dealer that I purchased these from. And it's like, what's wrong with these? And he's like, well, they're not the greatest sounding. They're cheap boxes. And it's like, yeah, but they like are really bad AM radio. Oh, they can't be that bad. He goes, I got some in back. I've never listened to them. He calls me back a half hour later. These things suck. It's like, yeah, they did, kind of. He's like, I'm sending a call tag because there's no way that anyone is going to want to have speakers that sound that bad. So that was my PAS. So I one and only time of trying to get their speakers. So thankfully I didn't get stuck with them. But oh my gosh, that was when I put power to those, because at that time returning things via UPS and such wasn't a big, wasn't a thing. It was like, oh, how do you send things back? And call tags were not so much of a thing. And so I was very happy when he decided to take care of it for me. But another pair of crappy speakers.
That is crazy. Just to have that kind of thing happen and have to deal with it. And fortunately, you had a dealer that was nice enough to help you out.
Exactly.
So what are some other flubs? Because my other ones on this list are regrets.
Oh, then we'll continue on then. So there was a company for a brief period of time in the DJ industry called Epsilon. And we did some videos on some of their products at some of the trade shows. They they started out with lighting, and they went from lighting, they added some audio and such, and they had big trade shows booths at LDI and NAMM for a couple of years. And then they all of a sudden were gone. Well, I found on a retailer's website, they had some of they had some really cool lights, some really high-end looking lights. And I found could buy these big lights that were like $2,000 lights. They were clearing them out for a couple $100, brand new in a box. And it's like, gosh, for that, I could go and buy those lights. And that would give me really a whole new light show for prom season. And I'm like, I got to do that. I mean, I'm under $1,000 and I've changed my light show. So I order them up and they get here. And it was a moving head that would pivot, and it had two bars of 4, and the bars would pivot and the whole thing would spin, and I could do this tumbly thing. It was really cool. So I get them here. I plug the first one in. Dead. Nothing. So plug the second one in. Oh, hey, this one works. Great. This is awesome. I plug it into the DMX and use my board, and it doesn't work. Okay. Plug in number 3. It doesn't work either. It lights up, but it didn't talk DMX. Number 4, plugged it in. Hey, this one works. Woo, 1 out of 4. Light 1 was completely dead out of the box. Light 2, the DMX was actually, the out was the in and the in was the out, and it was miswired. So if I used a gender changer, I could make that one work. Light 3 or 4, whichever one did work, that one was the only one that worked fine out of the box, and it functioned and did its thing. And the other one, the best I can figure out is that they didn't solder the DMX pins in there, because it would not, DMX, it wouldn't talk to it whatsoever. You could make it run in standby mode, but you couldn't do master slave or anything. So I have these 4 lights, and it's like, okay, what do you do with them? They're from the refurb rack, basically, and I got a hold of the dealer on that, and it's like, hey, these things are junk. And they're like, yeah, we bought like the whole warehouse, and unfortunately we send them out, and we are picking them up about a week later on all of their gear. So the Epsilon stuff was just not very well. Maybe some people have had some really good luck with it, but any of the moving headlights have just been horrible. So they ended up picking them up, taking them back. The worst part about it is that they gave me a store credit for that, so I had to do something else with the money. But yeah, those were such a great idea. But when you get those and you've got that once again sinking feeling, it's like I just threw like $1,000 into these lights, and I can't do anything with them. So. Yeah, must listen to speakers. The Denon dual deck mini disc player. So let's stick on
that was the professional one.
That was the professional when that came out. We were like, ooh, that's really cool. But I don't know of anyone who actually bought it. And not that I was wasn't the one who was connected as well back then as I am now. But yeah, I don't.
I remember seeing a couple at one point, but I also remember going, like, this was not my main thing I was playing. I was just needing it for a few to flip around in and stuff like that. And it was definitely not something I was going to spend the extra money on.
Yeah. Mr. T mentions JBL speakers, thinking they would sound as good as another model number in their line. Got them, non-returnable. Still have them, still hate them. Oh, man. That's the only nice thing about the marketplace is that you can put something out in the marketplace and say, hey, they aren't sounding the best, but they make noise. And all of the Gemini speakers that were sent out that we did the video review, and it basically is like they're not the greatest, but hey, they're disposable speakers. Everybody, they're all gone. They were purchased. Somebody out there will buy them. So anyway, speaking of CD players, when we were making the jump from those home CD players, we had tons of Sony that we picked up from Best Buy and a couple of other audio shops in Minnesota. We were going to go to our first one, and I had heard I don't know where I had heard, but Gemini CD players, for some reason, somebody had said that Gemini was making a really good dual CD player. I thought, I'm going to get one. So I ordered one. It came in. I fired it up, and it's like, oh, it works. This is great. And then I shut it off. And then the next day it came out, and one of the decks wasn't working. Tried some trouble, couldn't do anything. So I got a hold of Gemini, and they're like, yeah, send it in, and we'll fix it and get it back to you. So I did that. Came back. Worked for a little bit. Halfway through the first show, and the thing died. Completely dead. Sent it back into Gemini. Came back again. I used it in the office for about 10 minutes, and it died again. I think it went back 3 times, and it never functioned. And it became this boat anchor. I believe I threw it away like probably 3 or 4 years ago because I found it in the bottom of a box. I want to say I paid $4.99 for that CD player, and it played maybe a half an hour at a show, maybe an hour tops in all of that time. It was my first experience with Gemini audio gear, and it wasn't a great experience on that part. So.
That was one of those products, and that I think a lot of us, you either started with one of two. You started with the Radio Shack versions of stuff, or you started with the Gemini versions of stuff. You every once in a while, you still see them at a show, and they still got some products that are being put out and stuff like that. But there was quite a few Gemini products. My wireless mic, in fact, I still have it, I think, on my equipment rack over there, was my first wireless mic, and it was plastic as all get out. It worked. Mm-hmm. It worked until finally I decided, okay, I need to
up the game.
To something.
Yep, up that game. As I'm thinking about it, I don't know if there's anything I ever bought from Radio Shack and we purchased some stuff. We didn't buy speakers from Radio Shack or amplifiers, but I had a couple of small mixers that I purchased from Radio Shack, and we used them, and they wouldn't make that list of regrettable purchases.
Right.
And the microphones functioned. So I can't speak to. You knew what you were getting going in, I suppose, was probably the way to describe that. It's like I expected more from some of these companies that I thought were moderate level quality in the DJ industry, and it wasn't to be the case.
You always get that surprise.
So here's one, and it wasn't because the piece of gear was bad. It was a good piece of gear. It's just the timing was horrible. When we were multi-system. When we first started doing high schools, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 shows at the time, we could still use Fog in schools. So the Fog Hog came out about that time from American DJ. And I went and I bought everybody 2 of them because I wanted to have 2 fog hogs on one on each side to blast that the dance floor and then have the beams of light and the beacons going and man, it was going to be so cool. So we went and ordered, I think it was 8 of them, and we got them, and that was the fall that schools started to put in their smoke detectors, their particle detectors. We were able to run, I think I ran one school with them for probably 2 years during that time. Otherwise, all the others just sat and never went out. And over time, I've just kind of sold them and given them away. So it was regretted buying them, but it wasn't because of the units themselves. It was just the wrong time. The summer after that, I believe, we did a street dance, and we ended up setting up all of them on the street. And I couldn't push all the buttons at the same time, so I had them set up around there, and I had a little 1x2 piece of wood. So I had all the buttons, and I could push that and hit all of them. And oh no, that one's recycling. Okay, so we're getting 4 out of the whatever. But yeah, we had it set up so we could do this whole block of this of town, aiming that way, and that way, trying to get them so we could cover the area. And yeah.
And Brian hits it right there on the head in the chat room. He says, "I think a lot of people buy things thinking they're able to upsell, then they get no bites." That would be one of mine. All right, so mine kind of very similar to yours. Why is it we always buy stuff for school dances, and that's when we always get the question mark. So yeah. I bought a pair of truss stands. So the stands in the I think it was Duratruss DT 3800 if I still remember correctly, and then the truss bar went across the top.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what, this is gonna be big. Nobody in my area is doing anything like this. So I'm gonna put the stands up, and I'm gonna put the truss on it, and I'm gonna hang my moving heads and everything else. And I played around with it in my house, and I got it to the first school that I did it for, and I went, man, this just takes too long to set up. I'm like, and even at that, like, it kind of looked okay, but it also was like, if I did another stick, like because I think I only ended up doing one set of truss, like it was, or like one piece of truss, which is mine. I think we're like the 6 feet, 2 meter sticks. I'm like, if I did 2, it might be a little bit different. Get a few more lights up there. It might look really cool, but it was just like, man, that was a lot of work for what I ended up doing and trying to get up there. Why? And they have never gone out since. The stands, I've never used them. I've used the truss. I've done truss totems, and I've gone to using that, but it was just like, no, that was a waste.
So speaking of truss, I've actually got a couple of those now that you remind. I wasn't even thinking about these, but this one of the very first DJ conventions I went to in the late 90s, there was a company called Night Trussing, KNIGHT Trussing, or maybe Night Lighting. Anyway, they made a truss that was an arch truss, and it was about 16 feet wide, and I think it's about 9 feet at the peak or something to that effect. It was a triangular, I believe, trussing. No, it was a square, but it was only a square, probably about 8-inch squares, and it was just a cool little thing. I had the quick attach pins for the corners and things. The biggest problem was that top piece up there was about 10 feet long, or 9 feet long, whatever, the long crosser. And it was too big for my truck and trailer, so I didn't carry it. I bought this stuff, and I probably paid $1,700 for it. I used it at one show, and that particular show, we went and we tied it to the top of the trailer because it was too long to fit in the trailer. So we tied it down, and everything was good. We went up there, we did the show, and then as we're coming back, it started to snow. And it was such a mess and sloppy, and there was road salt and all this garbage that was when we got home. So I had to try to clean that trussing. That's probably not why I didn't ever use it again. It was because of, as you say, it's a pain in the butt to set up. It looked cool, but it was the trussing itself wasn't that tough to get up. But then you had to go mount all the lights on and then run all the wires and do all those different things because you couldn't pre-rig it whatsoever. So the trussing was a great look. It's just we never used it again. The other one was a trussing system, an aircraft lighting system I bought from Colorado Sound and Light. Now that one I actually used on a regular basis for about 3 months. and I loved how it worked. And it was like, this is so great. And then I got into a sequence of shows where it didn't fit the room, because it had to be 10 feet of space plus your stands. I didn't have enough room, and I got away from it. And then all of a sudden I started realizing again that, that took a lot of time to go. And yeah, you could you put them together and you put them on the trees and you get them up there, and then you run the wires. Or I could just have a light tree, plug it in, and I'm pretty much. So yeah, Colorado Sound Light stuff was great stuff. It didn't fit what I was wanting to do.
So I have my first lighting system that I ever bought. It was the big halogen lights, and where like you plug them into the rack and you had to turn on the light and it turn on and you get the color because you put a filter in front of it. And this is like naive, and I don't even know. Like I was looking through a catalog, and it's like, oh, that's the kind I want, and what. I am buying ones that I think each bulb was 600 watts. Okay, so you might know where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
okay.
I've got I think my version of the story. It'll be very similar. Keep going.
So everything's good. I use it for a couple different gigs. I mean, everything seems to be going fine. I get to one event, it's school dance, of all places, and I've got 6 of them. So I have like the T-bar trussing, or not the T-bar, but the across and then 2 stands. And I've got 4 on the top and I got 2 down below. And they're flashing. Everything's going great. 600 watts apparently on a school system was a little too much. And my sound system was on a different breaker, which was good. I didn't blow anything. Like I didn't trip anything. I browned out. I had 1 light left.
Oh,
1.
Oh my goodness.
It was just too much. And fortunately somehow we got through the night. But it was just like, yeah. So for the longest time, I just said, listen, I don't want to do events in this. Like it was at the school. It was like actually in the school. If I'm in, I'm not plugging in there. In fact, the first time I went back, they're like, listen, we've been doing a lot of renovations. I got a tester to test the outlets and everything. Cause I was like, even though I'm not using anything near as powerful, I was so worried that I was going to like have some sort of problem again.
Yep.
But yeah, it was 600 watts. I mean, like 3,000 watts. I'm sure I'd surprised I didn't catch anything on fire.
So my version of that is I had to get the shiny chrome Par 64 cans with the 1,000-watt bulb, because my thought is that I can always dim them down, and then I have that ability to go super bright when I need it. And it's like, okay, so I went out and I bought 16 of them. Okay. I took 8 of them to my first school dance, and I plugged them in, and I had my little DJ controller that would take it through chase sequences. And we started out, the lights were plugged in, and I plugged the lights in over here, and I plugged the audio over here. So I felt pretty good about this. They start, and they're doing, the red, green, yellow, they're doing that. And it's like, okay, so that's working pretty good. And then the next sequence is 2 lights on each tree. Well, 15 amp outlet over here, 1,000 watt plus 1,000 watt plus 1,000 watt plus, that's 4,000 watts of power being pulled out of that wall. So you're talking, we're pulling about 30 amps of power out of a 15 amp outlet over there. We ended up burning up the outlet. Not only did we pop the breaker, we burned up the outlet. There was scorch marks on the outlet. So one show, they actually didn't even make the whole show, I didn't use all 8, because I ended up unplugging one of them and going down to one tree and set it just so it was the ding, 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 one light, and that's all we could do to make sure we wouldn't blow things. Yeah, halogen. And then, now we can get LEDs that.
Now we can have blinding everybody with lights, and it uses not even half of or a third of something.
Melt gels. Yep, I have that melting gels. I did that on the 300 watt ones numerous times, where you had the light on for a spotlight dance, and you brought them up too high and you left them there, and it's like, something's melting, something's burning. My lights. Let's see. So what are we up to? So I'm gonna take a little bit of and I wanted to see. I think it's here actually. One of my biggest in all of the gear I purchased for doing shows. This is probably one of the worst investments I ever made. This is the Mevo. It's a little camera. It is I believe it's either 2K or 4K camera. It has the ability to do things, hook up to your phone and do your live streaming and such. You can, and the bottom part of it this is all battery, by the way. This is the actual camera unit, and then it's got its adapter for a camera stand, and the rest of it's all battery here. This particular unit I bought because I thought, well, this is going to be so great because I could go stick this on a stand because it has the little tripod adapter, and I could stick this in a corner of a dance floor and to be able to catch the action. And it had the ability to see faces and zoom in on the faces. And I thought this would be so cool because, for doing things and to be able to, watch my video after I'm done, this would be gold.
Yeah.
Well, we ran it for 2 events. And the audio on this thing was so bad that that was unusable. Okay, so we could maybe run the audio in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, what would happen is that it would zoom in on somebody's face, and it was following them, and there were times where it would follow them right off the dance floor. So it would crop into that person, and it would go. If the person went over and stood on the edge of the dance floor talking, and if they didn't leave completely, it just sat there on their face. And it's like, but they're over here, and there's dance floors here, and all these things going on. It's like it just, and I could have defeated that and done some things with the app and such, but it's like it was just so depressing. And then when the lights went down, it wasn't bright, and it's like, I don't know. I probably have close to $1,000 invested in that, and it's basically been one of these things that's like. The best spot to do this is if a person would go, we used it one time successfully out in middle of the day on a picnic table, and 2 of us were talking, and when one of us would talk, it kind of would hear that direction, and it would go towards us. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But for $1,000, it was money way thrown away.
It's just funny because I just had a videographer, and that wasn't that model. We were talking about like recording and recording at an event and streaming to an event, and that Mevo was one of the ones that came up. So
yeah, and it might be that in the hands of somebody who spends more time with it, like any tool. Part of the appeal to it was supposed to be an out of the box solution. Just hey, here it is, off you go. And it wasn't my favorite whatsoever.
So my next one is going to kind of fit. It's going to fit in with Brian. Brian has talked about upselling and you don't get any bites. And mine was moving heads because it was this idea of I'm not a real DJ if I don't have moving heads. That's what that's what all the big guys are having, and I think part of it also was the fact that I had gone to some weddings of some relatives who were in area where that very much is the case. Like if you want to compete, you're going to have something in the moving head category because that's what goes out to every event. But I was trying to do it in a manner of, no, I want you to pay a little extra to have this specialty lighting. And I was getting nobody that was wanting to buy it. In fact, in all the years that I had my moving heads, probably on one hand, I could count the number of people who wanted that extra lighting. And one was just kind of like, I want your biggest package because
right.
I've got to impress my, bride to be. And then I had, another one who I kind of packaged it with a couple other things, and they wanted the other things. So they got the moving heads as a result, and they kind of liked it, but it was like, I had photographers who love it because they're like, oh, you're spotlighting it. This is perfect. I love the look. But I could not get couples who would take that leap. I finally just sold mine just recently because I was just like, they're just not going out. It's like they're taking up space. It's a pain. So that would be one of mine. I spent a lot for big moving heads.
Yeah,
case for these big moving heads,
and it's like they sit there.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. It's just checking the chat room there. So the next one is kind of something. It was more of an idea that went awry. We'll call it. So there were some DJs in the Upper Midwest that for a while were using kind of the little dance platforms, but they made them into kind of like a go-go stage. So they would have the platform, and it would be, and there was the bars, and they had lights on it, and it was like this little kind of go-go stage, what you'd see from like the 70s. And I thought to myself, this is a cool idea. So I went and I made this box. It was a 6 foot long, 3 feet deep, and I put a cage of PVC pipe on it, and I had bolts on it so I could hang lights from it. And I would put rope light all the way around and back through the thing. And then on the top, I'd have some snapshots, I'd have some pin spots and a controller. So we could go and when the fog was going, the beams would shoot through the fog while the kids were dancing in there. And then the rope lights could come on, and then it would be that, the glowing of the tubes, and then the strobes could come on. It just had a variety of effects on the thing. Had a few other lights that I bought. Oh goodness, I had a beaming light in there so that the beam would shoot through the kids and through the fog, so it looked like this Frankie Goes to Hollywood kind of a scene from the music video. I spent $3,000 probably between controllers and this and all the wood and all the pieces and to make it, and the lighting that was purchased for this thing. I had just so much time and money into this thing. It was crazy. And it ran 4 times. Why did it end? Because it was cool. The kids, when they were in it and they were doing their things, and you throw them, the inflatable guitar, and they were doing their thing, it was fabulous. It was huge. It's because teenagers thought that, hey, I bet I can try to do a chin up on that PVC piping up above. And it was 1-inch PVC pipe, and oh my goodness gracious. So before shows, it seemed like almost every time, either it was in transit or because of a break, that we were there splicing PVC tubing. Had the little gel or the glue, the cement, fixing the tubing on that thing. And after a few times, it's like, yeah, we'll just put it on the shelf. So I think what ended up happening to it is I took the tubes all apart. I know some of the tubes are still out in the back shed. The lights, they went away. And I think the box, I took all the wheels out, all the casters off, and all the adjustments and things to make it set. And I think we burned it on the burn pile and back one night. It's like, yeah, we're gonna sink it to the bottom of the sea. But yeah, our go-go cage. And it was cool. It was really, really cool.
One of my other regrets, and this is kind of funny because we've talked about this piece of equipment that I have a couple different times. I regret my trailer. Okay. Not because of what I have now, and not necessarily because of what I bought the first time, but when I first bought my trailer, I kind of did a twofold thing. I had been running a minivan. My first son was about to be born, and I couldn't keep, in my view, you had to take the seats out of the minivan. This wasn't like the stow and go type of stuff. Like you had to physically take the seats out. So it was too much of a pain to be doing that to put the gear in because it hits cars. So I got a vehicle and then a trailer. And I think if I had been smart about it at the time, of course I was doing business very differently at that point, but if I had been smart about it, I would have gotten a van just for that and kept my regular vehicle for myself.
Sure.
And then I would have had a van. And the reason why I regret the trailer is this. I've gone to a few different locations where if I was only as long as even an extended van, it would have been a heck of a lot easier trying to do it.
So much so, yeah.
Or pulling in and pulling out. I mean, oh my gosh, I don't know how many times I've gone, trying to get at,
Yep.
and you think you got it, and you're like, oh man, I missed it again. All right, got to go it, and then you're jerking even more because you're like, oh, I thought I had it, but I didn't. And yeah, so, as much as I love my trailer and I love the features that I have as a result of my trailer, I think if I could have gone back and if I could go back to myself at that point, I would have been like, listen, this is what you want to do. This is the direction you want to go instead.
I get that. I get that. Now we'll go to vehicles.
Okay.
So in the vehicle realm, we again in the multi system, you need to get a vehicle. So I went to one of my local dealers here, and he had this half ton Chevy pickup, full size Chevy pickup. And it's like, that was kind of a cool looking truck. It was jacked up a little bit, and it's got the big tires, and it had a topper on it. It's like, yeah, we're going to get that. And it was clean and looked nice. And it's like, yeah, this will be great. And I had one of my DJs driving it, and she's headed down the road. One of the times the alternator went out on it. And then there's the second time, I think she blew a tire, which the tires looked really new. So there was always that thing. And then I think the third time she had it, she threw the fan right through the radiator. Somehow the fan disconnected. So basically, every time that truck went out and it was just a freaky thing, because there were a couple of DJs used it. A couple of them never had a problem with it. Every time she used it, something broke. And the last time when the fan went through the radiator, it's like, okay, we're done. It was just a freaky, weird thing. But yeah, that was one of the worst vehicles I ever bought. That had just completely was junk when it came. Yeah, that was yeah. We get a call from her. She's like, John, you won't believe it. And it's like, what happened to the truck this time? She goes, there is water all over the ground. I think the radiator you blew a hose. Oh, okay. Well, I can get a ride home. So the truck was left there. So the next morning, my dad and I went down there with a car carrier, the little thing to put it up, and get down there. And there on the ground is the fan. And of course, there's antifreeze all over the ground. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's what happened. Threw it right into the radiator, and it came out the front and then fell down.
Yeah, after the first two things, I don't know if I'd let her drive anymore. Jimmy's like, stop letting her drive anything.
I think there was, yeah, I think that was part of the thing, as after a period of time that was the case. Let's see. So getting back to gear.
Yeah.
So this is something that I was, some of the American Audio stuff I was a fan of. And I had the VMS, I think it was the 2, and had some success with that. Then the VMS 4.1, because Brian had mentioned that the VMS 4 was the one to avoid. So when they came out with the 4.1, I ended up picking one of those up. And that was my first real controller that I had, a DJ controller, compared to going with CD players. And it's like, this is pretty cool. I did some videos on the VMS 4.1, and this is really neat. So I thought, how much difference could there be between the 4 and the 4.1? So I decided that when there was a 4, I saw a 4 that a dealer had, and they were wanting to sell. It's like, I'll get that, just to have a backup. Yeah, it was absolutely horrible. It's like it was night and day difference from the 4.1, and it sounded terrible. It was. The microphone, I would swear I was the teacher from the Peanuts movie, or the Peanuts cartoons. Just such a disappointment in that controller. So once I had the thing, and it's like, well, can I set? No, you can't. It was it was a refurb type unit. It's like, but I don't know if it works properly. No, it does. That's what they do. So it was on the shelf in there until about probably 2 months ago. I don't think I ever used it, and then I threw the thing. Yeah, send it to the recycling. Yeah, Jimmy, they both are yuck. Yeah, after moving to the Denon, there's definitely a difference. The 4.1 is functional. The 4 wasn't whatsoever.
Well, and like you said, kind of for that time, it was early on in a lot of the controller game. There wasn't a lot of units, and oh my gosh, the way they've come. The way all the units have come since then is just remarkable. But yeah, it was interesting to see how, different gear was set up. Mm-hmm. And that.
So let's talk about homemade gear. We'll continue along that one.
Okay.
We had this really neat idea that we were going to build a case that we could have our everything in one. This is before you could buy a lot of the wheeled cases and things. We're talking 1988, and we thought we're going to build something so we can have our CD players in here, And we can put the amplifier here. We can put our equalizer here. We can put our crossover here. And we can set the microphones up on top. And then we can have a turntable up there. Oh, and then we had a couple of cassette tapes. So it was like 3 CD players, a cassette. We could set a turntable on top because we didn't have, there's some music we only had on vinyl. So anyway, we had this and we designed it, put it together, loaded everything in it. Didn't even think about how heavy this thing was going to be. We built it out of 2x4s, and then we wrapped it in 7/16 inch plywood because we wanted to make sure it was going to be durable. Then we made this big cover for it. We put garage door handles on the thing because, we figured it was going to weigh something, so, we'd have some weight. So the very first time that we went to go pick this sucker up, it took 2 of us everything we could do to... So for the first year of our DJing, this is what we had to use. It did look definitely like a coffin. They would refer to it when we would carry it into places. We were bringing in the dead dog in the dog coffin, and it was this heavy beast of a thing. But unfortunately, we had spent all of our money to buy the gear and to buy the pieces of wood. So it's like we had no money. We had to pay off the gear before we could go and try to find something or do a different workaround on this. So yeah, I think we used it for probably a year and a half. And every time we moved that sucker, it was like, oh my God, what did we do?
And you didn't have wheels on it, right? The only way to move it was...
Yeah, to grunt it. Yeah, no wheels whatsoever. Okay. And of course, the only cart we had, rock and roller carts didn't exist. And 4-wheel carts that lay down as a 4-wheel, it didn't exist. We had 2-wheelers, and there was no way that you could put that on a 2-wheeler because we didn't have the foam to keep things set in there. So if you tip it, then the things would kind of flop back and forth. So it always had to stay upright. Oh God, that was such a mess.
Wow.
Yeah, that was such a mess. But now we have all this cool stuff.
Yeah. The coffin that kills you.
Yeah, the coffin that took me out.
I'd be worried about setting that on a table too.
Yeah. We had to have. We ended up one place we had a table that was pretty floppy and soft, and we were worried the whole night that it was, as people were jumping, that it was going to go down. So I think we ended up we ended up making a table. We bought the legs from our local hardware, big box store, and then we took a sheet of plywood and wrapped the edges with 1x2 and sanded them down, and then stained the thing black. And so now we have a table that weighs twice as much as any table you would have at a venue. And now we get to carry that in too. We made the table because the trailer, I think, was an 8-foot trailer. So we made the table like 7'6", which we technically didn't need that much of a table, but that way we could both, myself and my partner, we could both stand behind the table if it was an almost 8-foot table compared to a shorter table where one of us would have been out on the side.
Well, that's because both of you had to be like this just to be able to make it through after carrying that for a year and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
John was jacked.
Yeah. Let's see. So I'm gonna one last story, and then I'll be done for tonight. This was one of those purchases that it was one I don't regret making, but when you look back at it, it was just a sign of the times of what we had at that time. So when you're trying to put together that very first light show, Ben has told a story about his coffee cans and putting floods in a coffee can, which a lot of us did a variation of that because DJ lighting wasn't around as much and you couldn't find it, or it was expensive and you were trying to cut corners. Our version of cutting corners was to make a little metal box that was made in shop class. We drilled holes in it, and then we put some little push button momentary buttons in it. So we had 6 buttons on the thing, and then on the front it had the RCA connections, and we ran one of the RCA connections going into it was a 12-volt power supply. So J.C. Whitney bought this little 12-volt power supply. I think it was, I don't know, however many amps it was. Ran into the box. Then all those little momentary switches had an outgoing RCA that would go to a different beacon light that we also picked up from J.C. Whitney. So we had 2 yellow, 2 green, 2 red, and 2 blue beacons up on top of that. Then we decided we can take this a little bit more. So we bought some little white of their little beacons, or not beacons, but just little white reverse lights actually. And we put 8 of them on a board and put that in front of us to use that as a blinder. So now we could go and we could play. We could go red, red spinny, yellow spinny, green spinny, blue spinny, back and forth, and then blinder, 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 that kind of a thing. And that was our light show. That screwy, crappy, weird little 12-volt light show. People had never seen anything like that around the area. It's like, that is so cool, because those beacons would do their thing, and you could, play the buttons like you were playing along to the music and such. So you could really customize the show. Oh my gosh, that was such a crappy little light show, and yet it was at that time really, really effective, and almost cutting edge at that particular time when you had that person to control it and become a semi-intelligent light show that responded to that. So now that particular light show, I think all of it's still in the back shed. I don't think
of course, you got to keep the first.
I think that one is still back there. All the original CD players and all that kind of stuff, the speakers are all gone, but I think that light show's back there, mainly because of the 12-volt power supply. Because it's like, if your kids ever want to do an experiment with 12-volt power, to play with this, that, or the other thing, nothing, curls your hair like 12 volts.
Don't know.
Yeah, there is that. I'm sorry. All right, that's my list. My list and some tonight.
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. I hope you in the chat room and those of you watching at home had as much fun as John and I did. First off, just kind of going down memory lane and because it's honesty. I mean, I will say the DJ. I feel like the DJs now have a little bit better luck, I guess, or better resources than we had, because a lot of times it was like you said, you think you might sound good. It sounds like it'd be a great deal. Let's get it in here, and you do it because you didn't really have the option at the local shop to do it, or in the expo, depending upon when you were doing it. Who knows if you would have made it to those and that kind of thing. So there's definitely times that things are purchased with the best intentions, but not always the best thoughts beforehand. So thank you very much for taking some time out to join us tonight. John, what do we got coming up this week?
Tomorrow night we're going to be diving into some music. Dan, you and I are going to jump back in, and we're going to talk about some of the songs from the early 2000s. Dan, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have some hits that they could use on the dance floor. Maybe since we talked last week about cocktail music, maybe some songs from that era that would fit into that cocktail time, and maybe that dinner time, since that's a little bit different. And then I wanted to go through and have us, pick like 5 ballads from that era that we could kind of highlight. So, danceable, cocktail, dinner, and ballads. Tomorrow night, that'll be the first show. The second show, Jay and Brian and I were going to be, I think, doing a music show. I think that's tomorrow night. They were doing that. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a DJ Expo Remembrance show. And then Wednesday, I think this week is the wedding chat. If the wedding chat guys are going to be available. So we'll see how things go, because with summer, it's a little bit hit and miss depending upon where people are at, and if they're headed here or headed there with family and such. So, but yeah, that will be the stuff for tomorrow night. So we'll see you guys then. Deal.
And as always, I do want to remind you that we have the DJN Chill Room going on djntv.com/chill. You can follow that and go check that out and talk with other DJs and maybe share some of the stories like we had. Some of you shared them in the chat, but maybe you want to go into a little more detail and just have some fun with some people. Make sure you go ahead and doing that. Thank you very much again for being a part of our evening. You guys have a wonderful night. We'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.